On 10th September, Charlie Kirk was in Utah addressing a packed gathering of supporters when the fatal shots rang out.
Great.
In seconds, the scene collapsed into chaos. Hundreds watched the attack unfold before their eyes, and within minutes, the entire world was watching. Clips of the shooting flooded social media almost instantly. People were not just hearing about Charlie Kirk's death, they were watching it, replaying it, sharing it, trying to understand it. Minutes after the attack, doctors on the scene confirmed what the crowd already knew.
It is my great dishonor to be the person that says this and breaks this to you on television, but President Donald Trump is announcing on Truth Social, the great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead.
The speed of his death, matched only by the speed of its transmission across the digital world, left millions stunned. A man who spent his life speaking in public was silenced in public, with his final moments witnessed by thousands in the room and millions more on screens. It was a shocking end, carried out in full view of a nation that claims to cherish free speech. It sent a signal far beyond the walls of that Utah hall. But this is not only the story of one man's assassination, it is something darker. His murder is not just the silencing of a voice. It is the slow strangling of the very ideals that built the United States. For more than 2 centuries, America defined itself as the land where speech could be free, where argument was not punished but protected, where rebellion against authority was a virtue, not a crime. It was the nation where you could stand on a stage, say your piece, and trust that words would be answered with words, not with bullets. The attack on Charlie Kirk is not just about him. It is about America losing faith in its own foundation. It is about a country that once defended debate, now turning hostile to it. It is about the erosion of civic responsibility, the weakening of a shared respect for truth, and the fading belief that people can live free and equal because they can speak free and equal. This is not only the murder of Charlie Kirk, this is the murder of American values. When the United States was born, it was not founded on bloodlines, monarchies, or ancient dynasties. It was founded on words written into a declaration, words hammered into a constitution, words that promised freedom of speech, freedom of press, and the right to stand apart from power. Thomas Jefferson wrote that the purpose of government was to secure the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. James Madison warned that a republic cannot survive without the free circulation of ideas. Benjamin Franklin, the old printer, declared that whoever would overthrow liberty must begin by silencing speech. America was never perfect, but it was defiant. The colonies rose against the British Crown because they demanded the right to think for themselves, to argue for themselves, to question authority without fear. The revolution was not only political, it was intellectual and moral. Its fuel was dissent. For generations, this spirit defined American identity. Town halls, newspapers, public squares, and universities became arenas of fierce argument. Citizens disagreed passionately, yet still believed that argument itself was sacred. To preserve the republic was to preserve the right to dissent. The assassination of Charlie Kirk is therefore not only a crime against the man, it is a betrayal of the inheritance that made America different from the empires it defied. A republic cannot survive when speech becomes a battlefield and ideas become mortal threats. From its earliest days, America drew strength from being more than just a country. It was an asylum, a refuge for those who had nowhere else to go. The Pilgrims crossed the Atlantic to escape persecution in England. Jewish communities fleeing pogroms in Russia and discrimination across Europe found safety in New York, Baltimore, and Chicago. After the revolutions of 1848 shook Europe, dissidents fled across the ocean with banned pamphlets in their bags and outlawed ideas in their heads. In America, those ideas could be shouted from rooftops. In the 20th century, this tradition only deepened. The United States opened its doors to Hungarians escaping Soviet tanks in 1956, to Cubans fleeing Castro, to Vietnamese families crossing oceans after the fall of Saigon, to Afghans who assisted American forces, to Syrians fleeing civil war. The numbers tell the story. Since 1975, more than 3 million refugees have resettled in the United States, more than in any other country. In 2021 alone, asylum seekers arrived from more than 100 nations, drawn by a single promise that in America, they could live without fear, and America did more than shelter them. It turned Italians, Irish, Poles, Nigerians, Mexicans, Russians, and Vietnamese into Americans. The country was not a fortress. It was a crucible, a place where strangers were refined into citizens, where identity was shaped by belief rather than ancestry. America once promised that no matter where you came from, your voice could find protection here. Now, America struggles to protect its own. America did not only shelter people, it gave them a stage. From the beginning, argument was treated as a civic duty. The Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers were not secret documents whispered in fear. They were printed widely, studied publicly, debated openly. The 19th century continued this tradition. The nation argued passionately over slavery, industry, labor rights, and the role of women. The press was loud and messy, but it was alive. Democracy was noisy. It was argumentative. It was free. The 20th century deepened that culture. Martin Luther King Jr. could challenge the government from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Students could occupy university campuses in protest of war. Journalists could confront presidents, expose corruption, and publish truths that shook the nation. This was the America where Charlie Kirk built his career. Whatever one thought of his politics, his work existed within the long American tradition of speaking, debating, clashing, arguing. He lived in the belief that disputes belonged on stages, not on battlegrounds. That is why his death is symbolic. A man who used words was killed by someone who rejected them. His assassination represents not just the end of his life, but the weakening of the culture that once held debate as sacred. The murder of Charlie Kirk marks a turning point. For centuries, Americans believed that when ideas clashed, the proper response was persuasion, not violence. You wrote your pamphlet, you organized your rally, you challenged your opponents to a debate, not a duel. But this assassination signals that something has broken. It tells us that words are no longer enough for some, that instead of confronting arguments, we now silence the person who speaks them. That the contest of ideas is giving way to the politics of intimidation. When you kill a man for his words, you do not only kill him, you kill the possibility of disagreement. You tell millions of others to speak at their own risk. You transform dissent into danger. And that is not democracy. That is the death of democracy. The bullets that ended Charlie Kirk's life were aimed at more than his body. They were aimed at the principle that ideas must be fought with ideas, not with violence. His death marks not just the loss of a man, but the suffocation of the American conversation itself. What happened in that Utah hole belongs to a larger pattern. America, once the global asylum where voices found protection, now struggles to protect dissent at home. The numbers show a country in distress. Political violence is rising. In 2022, 1 in 5 Americans told pollsters they believed violence is justified for political goals. Trust in government has collapsed from 77% in 1964 to just 16% today. A nation that once absorbed millions of refugees is now fracturing under its own tensions. Fear is spreading faster than trust. More than half of Americans believe political violence will increase in their lifetime. Some fear the outbreak of civil conflict. Immigrants and refugees still arrive, but they enter a society where disagreement is more dangerous than they imagined. Between 1975 and 2020, America welcomed millions seeking safety. Today, many find a country where arguments are not settled by debate or ballots, but by outrage and sometimes blood. The tragedy is not only that a man has been killed. The tragedy is that the country that once turned difference into strength is now turning difference into division. Charlie Kirk's death is therefore not only a wound to his supporters, it is a wound to the American story itself. A story that promised refuge, debate, freedom, and truth, yet is now struggling to uphold them. The death of Charlie Kirk is not simply the end of a life. It is the end of something larger, a sign that the values that once made America different are eroding. Free speech, once defended fiercely, is now fragile. Debate, once cherished, is now dangerous. The refuge that once sheltered the oppressed cannot even guarantee safety to its own citizens. Every republic is tested by how it treats dissent. America once survived revolutions, wars, depressions, and cultural upheavals because it believed that words were stronger than weapons. But when a society begins to kill for speech, it is not only silencing voices, it is silencing itself. And a country that silences itself cannot remain free. Charlie Kirk's assassination forces America to confront a brutal question. What remains of the United States when the values that built it are no longer defended, but destroyed? If America abandons the ideals that made it exceptional, then it is not only a man who has been killed, it is the American promise itself.